Morning, guys. It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video today. Today we're going to be talking about how John Metchie shocked the Houston Texans on Saturday when he had a standout performance in the Texans' 28-10 preseason win over the New York Football Giants. The Texans won 28-10, and even though C.J. Stroud did not play most of the game, only played the first quarter, and looked pretty good through about, if it wasn't exactly 90 passing yards, it was about 90 passing yards. I think it was like 89 or 90. But C.J. Stroud went out there, played a couple drives. The Texans, when C.J. Stroud was in the game, they did score, but that was because of Jalen Petrie pick six. But even though the Texans did not score the football when C.J. Stroud was out there, they had a productive drive. C.J. Stroud was able to take them to the goal line, and look, I think in chip shot range, they made a good decision to go for it on 4th and goal. They did that. Unfortunately, the Texans did fail on 4th and goal. And then in CJ's second drive, time expired in the first quarter, and we did not see CJ Stroud again. But in the second drive, we did see CJ make some nice throws and some completions, but it didn't lead to a scoring drive. And CJ really didn't have a full chance in that drive. But not once did we see CJ Stroud connect with John Metchie. But it was Case Keenum and Tim Boyle who found good connections in this game with John Metchie. And he was able to have his best game so far with 6 receptions for 68 receiving yards with 1 touchdown. Now, I don't know how many people have brought this up when what I think was the big turning point for John Metchie in this game. When I mentioned when C.J. Stroud left the game. C.J. Stroud left the game on a 3rd and 10. Weird. I know it's a weird time for him to leave, but I like the decision for DeMeco Ryans. First quarter expires. You decide, even though it's a 3rd and 10, not to bring out C.J. Stroud for 3rd and 10. I'll tell you guys why I like that decision. On 3rd and 10 in a preseason game, when your starters have played throughout the whole first quarter, on 3rd and 10, on where you're going to be passing the ball, there's going to be some pressure. And even though CJ did not have any pressure in that game before then, with a great defensive line on 3rd and 10, I don't think DeMeco Ryans really wanted to find out, if that pressure would come. You don't want to take that chance, especially when it's only out, especially when he would only be going out there for one more play if he doesn't extend the drive. So Case Keenum comes out there, no Davis Mills due to his rib injury. Case Keenum comes out there to start that second quarter, and the Texans on 3rd and 10 decided to throw a deep ball to John Metchie. Now, it was a nice throw by Case. John Metchie's able to catch the ball, but he was not able to get his feet in bounds. But that was a great catch, and even though it was not called a catch, when he was able to get a great catch like that, being covered, even though that's not called a catch, and that's not officially a catch, that has to feel, and I know John Harris brought this up during the broadcast for the Texans, that has to feel great for his confidence. Because this is a guy who's been struggling in practice recently. To start off the practices and start off training camp, John Metchie was doing really good. But then recently in practices and these last 2 preseason games, John Metchie has suddenly just been terrible. If you look at Metchie's first 2 preseason games, 2 receptions for 11 receiving yards, had some drops, was not doing what a second-round draft pick going into his second year should be doing. I'm not going to count John Metchie's first year because this is his 3rd season in the NFL, but this is his second year playing, so I'm going to say going into his second season. But a second-round pick, there were balls that were thrown to him that he should be catching. And I think that we saw his full potential on Saturday when he really started to get hot. 6 receptions, 68 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Absolutely fantastic. He was showing his speed and a couple of these completions. He was showing off his hands. Great routes as well by John Metchie. Doing a great job. And this is a guy that, he's fighting too. He's really fighting. He's for a second-round pick, he's fighting for a roster spot. Because, still in the third quarter, mid-third quarter, Tim Boyle out there, he's still playing. I mean, and I think that's the same thing for Xavier Hutchinson, but the other guys, now I know it's not fair to include Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and Stephon Diggs, but you're starting wide receivers, and even look at another guy like Robert Woods, a veteran who is fighting a roster spot, is also fighting for a roster spot. Those guys are not playing anymore. Now, sure, saying that for Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and Nico Collins is it's not the same as saying that for John Metchie. But for Robert Woods, another guy who's fighting for a wide receiver spot as well, who was not playing in that time, it does show you that those younger guys and John Metchie and Xavier Hutchinson were playing out there extra in this game deep into the third quarter because the Texans, I think they have a lot of eyes on those two guys, and I think they really want to see more from John Metchie and Xavier Hutchinson going into these last two games. I know there's only one more now, but I think they had that mindset going into the Giants game, and I think they have that mindset going into the game against the Los Angeles Rams next week. I don't see the Texans starters playing next week against LA and Houston. I don't think we'll see CJ Stroud or the three number one wide receivers in Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. So I think that leads guys like John Metchie and Xavier Hutchinson to start the game off. Whoever's starting at quarterback for the Texans next week, whether it's Case Keenum or it's Tim Boyle or Davis Mills is healthy, I think those three guys, and Robert Woods, John Metchie, and Xavier Hutchinson, all those guys who are fighting for a roster spot will be on the field as the starting wide receivers on Saturday next week when the Texans face off against the Rams. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see those three guys all play in the first half, because what's the really interesting thing is that these are three wide receivers that are fighting for the last two wide receiver spots. Now, the interesting thing about it is one is a second-round pick that the Texans drafted from Alabama that they have a lot of high hopes on, but they haven't gotten, to see a lot of him due to, the cancer, and last season, him not being very high in the Texans' depth chart at wide receiver. Really didn't play a lot, and when he did, he looked solid, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough, showing time of him for the Texans to really be sure if he was, going to be a guy that's a part of their future. And I think that's this season where, even though the Texans have a stacked wide receiver room, I think they still want to keep him a little bit involved, because I think he is a guy that the Texans could potentially hope to be maybe a wide receiver 4 type wide receiver for the Texans this year. And if Stephon Diggs potentially leaves, he could be a starter for the Texans in the next couple years. So, I think they want to see more of him. And I still think he is fighting, just because the fact that of those first 2 poor preseason games, only 2 receptions for 11 yards, not, having some drops as well. So, I definitely think we'll see a lot of John Metchie on Saturday against the Rams, and I think the same thing goes for Xavier Hutchinson and Robert Woods, because you want to go to Xavier Hutchinson real quick. This is a guy who's been pretty good in preseason as well. He has 8 receptions for 80 receiving yards, and he's also done a pretty decent job when the football has been handed off to him, as he has 2 carries for 27 rushing yards. So Hutchinson has touched the ball 10 times with receptions and carries and has a total of 107 yards. So he's been fantastic for the Texans. Robert Woods has been a guy who has not had a huge presence for the Houston Texans throughout preseason, as he's only played in 2 out of the 3 preseason games. In the first preseason game, Robert Woods was really good with 4 receptions for 42 receiving yards. Now, in the game on Saturday against the Giants, Woods only had 1 target and only played a couple drives, so we did not see a lot of Robert Woods last week against the Giants. And then in the first game, obviously, he didn't play against the Bears in the Hall of Fame game. And he's been a guy who's been very good and has, made a presence throughout training camp. So, honestly, seeing him, as of Robert Woods, seeing him less makes me think he has a better chance to make the roster. When you're seeing someone a little bit earlier in the game and you're seeing them less than two younger guys that are fighting for the roster and playing deep in the third quarter like John Metchie and Xavier Hutchinson are, that makes me believe that the Texans, as of right now, going into this final preseason game, they're favoring Robert Woods over Xavier Hutchinson and John Metchie. So that's what that potentially means, is that it's John Metchie versus Xavier Hutchinson in this final preseason game for that last wide receiver spot. And that makes things really interesting. Do you want John Metchie, who has a lot of value because he was a second-round pick and just had this amazing game of 6 receptions for 68 receiving yards and 1 touchdown, and you still want to, give him a chance? Or Xavier Hutchinson, who's also been standout this preseason with 10 receptions for 80 receiving yards and 2 carries for 27 rushing yards. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Who would you rather make this Texans roster, Xavier Hutchinson or John Metchie? Also, another question, who do you think has had a stronger preseason, Xavier Hutchinson or John Metchie? I'm going to go over the stats one more time. For John Metchie, it has been a total of, so far, it's been 8 receptions for 79 receiving yards, while Xavier Hutchinson has a total of 10 receptions for 80 receiving yards and 2 carries for 27 rushing yards. So Hutchinson does have more yards, total of 47 more yards, but Metchie has made some big plays and has a touchdown. So let me know your thoughts. Who you think has made a more of an impactful preseason so far, and who you'd rather see make this Texans 53-man roster. That's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out. Go Texans.